So thanks for coming. So this week we're really excited to have Robin Livingstone with us of Fraser Livingstone Architects. Robin is co-founder and architect of the practice, where he works alongside Malcolm Fraser in Edinburgh. The practice's work covers a variety of sectors, from conservation through to housing, as well as education. The practice describe themselves as generalists, believing that architecture should be informed by light, connectivity, and gather. I'll pass over to Robin for his slide.
Thank you. Yeah, so Fraser Livingstone Architects. By way of a bit of background, I worked after graduating with Malcolm Fraser Architects for the best part of a decade. We at the practice was well known for lots of arts, cultural buildings, conservation work, as well as a lot of more bespoke housing projects for volume house builders. Malcolm and I went our separate ways when Malcolm Fraser Architects closed down, and then got back together about 3 years ago and set up Fraser Livingstone Architects. Thank you very much for inviting us to come and present our work. It strikes us from a distance that there's a very strong programme of lectures, and it's to your credit that you do that on a year-by-year basis. We are just before lockdown. We were due to move into this, but this is an old shop unit just on the south side of Edinburgh that we're based in. It was an old lamp gallery, and as we started to remove things and refurbish it, we discovered this rather fancy gold sign, the Buttercup Dairy Company. And it turns out it was there was a huge industry, Buttercup Dairy Company, that had lots of shops all around the place. I really enjoyed that and uncovering that. And so we're in a small shop unit. We converted the basement. There's a team of 8 of us in total. We have there's 6 full-time and 2 part-time staff. So there's myself and Malcolm, Ayla, Emma, Frederick, Andrew, and Col, and Liz, our office manager. And we used to have another Andrew that worked with us until last year. I wanted to just frame, I suppose, our work that I'll go on to talk about around a couple of books that have been important to me, actually since graduating. So I practiced obviously for too long already, but I also have been involved in academia. I teach at various schools of architecture. So I suppose what and Malcolm has taught a lot in the past as well. And the way we see the conversations we have in practice and in academia, that they should have a sort of common purpose in the formation and exchange of our ideas. So we do think about it more, not just as practice being very separate from the academic environment. We think it's still really all ultimately about research and about us being on a curve. We're architects, but we're all just at a different point in that process. But we're all really striving and thinking about similar things. And this book was a bit of a revelation for me. Colin St. John Wilson was the architect for the British Library. It's very interesting book, a bit of a manifesto, and it was really a call for an understanding of architecture as a practical art, and seeking an order that's not self-contained, but more about sight, about light, about human touch, and the circumstances of the particular site. So this book, really, it's I suppose a love letter to architects like Aalto, Hans Scharoun, Hugo Haring, and Frank Lloyd Wright, and really a rejection of the more avant-garde that was particularly prevalent maybe 20 years or so ago. The other book that I think is important to me personally as an architect is this book. You maybe recognise it, of O'Donnell and Toomey. A really interesting book that I suppose documents their practices approach to architecture, right from the small scale up to what they're doing now. And I wanted to read a quick quotation from it that I think is important for certainly my thinking as well. "We would hope that our buildings would feel strangely familiar in the places where they are sited and to the people who live with them. They should seem strange because they're new, because they're not completely conventional. They ought to be familiar in the sense that they belong where they're built, that they recast existing conditions in a new light, that they consolidate the urban and landscape systems that surround them." So this is a little summary that we pulled together actually after our first 9 months in practice that we exhibited at the RSA down in Edinburgh, and it was called Process and Progress. It was really our first 9 projects, obviously none built in that time, but it's an encapsulation, I suppose, of the processes that we go through. So we draw a lot in the studio. We could draw more, as we've missed, particularly in the last couple of years. Keen to get back into the studio, and we like to get the rolls out and draw and think about ideas and draw over each other's drawings. And we're not precious about these things. But it's a sort of summary of I suppose, the process that we go through in drawing and then developing that into images of our projects, and how our images are, I think, quite a lot of thought goes into curating them and thinking how to present our projects, not just from a stylistic point of view, but what it is that we're trying to portray or capture about the projects that we're working on. So these are in order of our first project. So the numbers down at the bottom are really just our project numbers in the office. This was the first project that we started with. Malcolm Fraser Architects have done a lot of work, or previously did a lot of work over the years on the water relief in Edinburgh. We did one of the first projects the practice did, which was Longwick Building in Stockbridge, into a Pizza Express restaurant. The practice did a lot of work on new walkways and reinstating routes next to the river, and really changing it from what was an industrial sewer into something that's much cleaner, much more pleasant to be in. And it's been interesting, particularly I think for Malcolm, who's an Edinburgh lad, to see it, how it's changed over the years. We also did the Water Relief Visitor Centre as well, which was another early project before my time at MFA. This project is right on the water. So that's an aerial view. If you go down through the new town, so it's to the north of the new town in Edinburgh, there's a major street called Dundas Street, and turns, and this confluence, it flows from Broughton Street, from Dundas Street, and from Trinity, all join at this junction. And then underneath, you're really not aware of the water relief as it tracks along, because it's beneath you, it's beneath the city, but it's a very significant node in the city. And it was the site of a former old toll house. So the bridge over was in and out of the city. So there was a building that sat on the site prior to what's there now, that acted as the toll house for the bridge. It's now, or has been for a number of years, since the 1980s, public toilets. But and really it's pretty discreet. It sits lower than the existing pavements. It turns the corner, and then there's significant drops. But you can start to see there in that photograph it's an important civic marker of Cannon Mills clock. This was taken, autumnal tree on the corner. It's quite important, we felt. And then this is from the bridge looking back to the building, so it starts to become more significant from the north looking south, and you can see the relationship to the water. A single-storey brick building. There's a number of these buildings built by the council around Edinburgh city centre, and a slate roof. And then you've got this significant bank of trees, which it has never been built on, so you really don't get an understanding of the water, despite it being natural, because of the way the site falls. This is from the other side, so the bridge is quite important when you think about the existing building, but you can see it nestles in there and really is quite closed off to the river. So the first thing we thought was important immediately was the section. So what do we do with this? We were really confined by the footprint of the building and very small slivers of land. So we couldn't go out the way, we had to go up the way. So instinctively it was thinking, well, what do we do with these natural or these inherited features of the surrounding city? Again, thinking about light, about connections through windows, about relationship to trees, scribbles, we're constantly scribbling. This is a model from the water side, and effectively what we did was took the roof off, extended up to create a new pavilion that sat on top of the existing brick enclosure. What was important to us was, or what was important to the project was that we effectively had to work with the existing structure as well as the existing foundations, and the significant issues of proximity to the water, as well as significant bus routes. So there wasn't any real way we could move out the way. It had to be up, and therefore how we connected up as we could. So there was really, I suppose, 4 key moves. There was, five. There was the new forced stair along the side, which built out over there was a small set of steps down to the footprint of the existing building. We've reversed that and put a set of steps up that actually animates the corner of the site and opens out onto the corner. There's then a big window, a civically scaled window that looks back towards the clock. Another big window, for obvious reasons, opening out over the river. We cantilevered the pavilion front and back to try and get as much bite in and get some more space, really for the use of it. And then the new entrance lobby on the corner, which axially was positioned so that as you moved up and down the stair and in and out of the building, that you were focused on the really beautiful mature tree on the corner. And then this smaller window horizontal. And what we had to do was make sure that the building could be used appropriately. And it couldn't all just be glass because of the small footprint. So the building was designed initially, it's a developer client that we're working with, and he wasn't totally sure what he wanted to do. And through evolving the brief, we eventually nestled on a restaurant building, primarily because of the confined nature and footprint. And also issues of access for public buildings. So the other key move that I forgot to mention was the section. And there's obviously this image is a little bit abstract in that you wouldn't really see or experience the building as you see it here because you've got lots of trees in the way. And as you move it up that four-stair and round the corner, you come in and you've got this big trapezoidal roof light that catches the sky. It's another significant move that we wanted to effectively make you more aware of what was there in the city already. So the other issues in a practical sense was just how we cantilevered out over it. So and what materials we picked had to be lightweight. We couldn't extend it up in masonry. It would put too much weight onto the existing structure. So it's a very lightweight structural steel frame with timber infill. And then we selected we thought about timber cladding, but in proximity to the water and also the busy vehicle route in and out of the city, we just felt it wasn't appropriate. And also because of the close proximity of trees, we felt it wouldn't weather well over time. So we ultimately ended up with a metal cladding that could wrap the new form. And that had a new language that sat on top of the, then proposed to paint out white. So it gave it a new identity. Other things practically that we couldn't get rainwater off the roof and get into gutters when we were cantilevering out over the water. So it fast became apparent that we actually needed to get essentially a gutter all the way around the building. And we played around with different options and essentially then ended up with this quite chunky, robust gutter system that allowed it to feed into rainwater pipes to get water off the roof and also for long-term maintenance. So how you think about these practical things, along with actually creating a language for the building that then sat and created a canopy over the four-stair and the entrance through the trapezoidal roof light, the upper level, and then the entrance lobby canopy. So these are just a series of photographs. It's getting towards completion. There's a new restaurateur just come in recently and is going to take it on, a Michelin star restaurateur. You start to get a feel for the connections. The river to the right hand side and the longer views down the river to the west. The city to the left-hand side, and although it's covered in blue tarpaulin, on this photograph, the treetops above. And then as you turn to go back out the way, that tree facing you through the glazed entrance door, that's the inner lobby door, but looking through the new lobby. This is it starting to get lined out. You get a feel for the connections to the clock, we were thinking about this where there's always double-decker buses sitting, and how that could be a really nice moment moving around the city in and out and people getting glimpses into the building. So it became almost more civic in nature. Start to get a feel for the sectional qualities. You can't see the tree tops there, but they are there. Again, it's just because it's the winter time, but you'll get the tops of the tree, the trees projecting up into the sky. That's how it sits in the city. So this is coming down from Broughton Street, if any of you know Edinburgh, and it nestles in the middle of the photograph there. And that big window, I think, is quite important for the presence it has on the corner. These are recent photographs. It's moved on a little bit more, but I think the brickwork is painted and this big flue is on the gable end to give it this quite domestic feel. But you start to get a feel for what's emerging on site. And then that big horizontal window that gives you connections directly to the water. And below that, we're also creating a little external terrace, which is currently disabled access ramp, which gives us disabled access into the lower restaurant space. But there's also then going to be a terrace that projects out over the water. And then you get a feel. So it's going to be called the Toll House, which has had some unkind jokes about it, with it being a former public toilet, but we still like the idea that it speaks of that the history of the Toll House being on the site. And that's from the east looking back to the west, with the bridge over and it poking out over the water. This was a project, our second project, this Kinning Park complex in Glasgow. It was a subject to a community sit-in that I think the First Minister was involved with back in the day. It was an old school, and it was going to be sold off and either knocked down or developed for housing, and the community staged a sit-in and managed to win that fight and retain it for a community use. So it is a community use as it stands. And what we were asked to look at, you can see there on the equivalent of a porta cabin. We were asked to look at this building for a new social enterprise hub. Malcolm's involved in an organisation called the Common Wheel, which lobbies government, and it was to create a new office building that they could share with like-minded organisations. What we were keen to do was we enjoyed the richness of the red sandstone, and we also enjoyed the 3-bay window and the repetitive pattern of the existing building and how that was really prominent on the skyline. And also it faces onto this urban park, which this part of Glasgow is pretty dense. So and it's right next to the M8 as well, just to the right hand side of that photograph. So you can actually see it as you move through Glasgow on the motorway. We were keen to create a gathering space in the middle of the site of the new building, and how that staircase could become animated and rich and encourage the different organisations on how chance and circumstance meetings might create a dynamic new social enterprise hub. So we were thinking about how a stair going up through the building could be used, and how we might create a forum space at the ground floor. You can see here on the lower section on the left hand side, this idea of the 3-bay pattern of windows and how we extruded that across onto the new building. But set it back from the existing school building, because the existing building sits right up against the footpath, so there was very, very little threshold. So we then suggested an entrance between the two buildings, so right in the middle of that little sketch, and then a cloister that ran across the front of the building that created threshold, gave it a civic identity, forum space at ground floor, and out onto the park. And then just scribbles and sketches of how we might animate that upper level to get sunlight into down through the plan as well. So these were some images that Andrew in the office did. You can see the entrance there, just that sits between that colonnaded cloistered walkway, and then the timberline stair heading up through the centre of the plan with office wings on either side. And we wanted to build it in solid timber construction. Malcolm Fraser Architects did a number of buildings, including a nursery building for the University of Edinburgh in CLT, and we also did another building for the university called the Edinburgh Centre. BRIAM outstanding conversion of an A-listed building in the world, and that was it was refurbishing, renovating the existing old high school building, and extending it with new elements that were primarily built in solid timber construction. And that's a preoccupation of ours. We obviously we're aware of the climate emergency. We think it's important that we try and push this as much as we can. And Malcolm in particular is engaged in advocacy work and lobbying to try to create a local Scottish industry that uses mass timber or produces mass timber, rather than us having to import it from Spain or Austria or Germany. So it was a CLT structural building, and then we were keen that the building, the insulations externally, etc., that we wanted it to be a lightweight cladding externally. So we looked at a vertically corrugated metal cladding, but that still spoke to the building, the existing school building next door. Just a cutaway section showing the roof lights, the bringing the light down into that vertical circulation space, and then that timber lined staircase and void with the forum space below. Lots of this thinking we employed in other buildings. From we like to use timber internally. Scottish Ballet in Glasgow, we created a new a central gathering space there that's timber lined. The Netherbow, various others that were done formally by Malcolm Fraser Architects. This was another early project. So Thackeray Medical Museum is down in Leeds. It's close to quite a deprived residential community called Hare Hills. I think I'm right in saying it's one of the biggest medical teaching university campuses in Europe. This is a museum building, but you can see the tower over the top of the building on the left. It's for nursing, midwifery, and for doctors as well. So this is a museum building that they wanted to. They're actually going through an initial phase that Simpson and Brown were leading when we were asked to look at opportunities for a second phase. That work, I think, is completed quite recently. So they've done lots of good internal refurbishment work. And longer term, they're thinking about converting other elements of the building into conference facilities and other uses to try to bring. With the building they have is they wanted to reach out to this community that passes their front door every day. It's obviously it's quite a severe closed off building, and they wanted to try and encourage more local residents to actually come into the museum and actually give them space that they could use day to day. So there was that element, and then there was also at the front of the building, it's really just a mass car park. So they wanted again to look to how we might landscape it and create more of a sequence or a route to the existing entrance door. So these are little scribbles about how we might engage with the existing building, create a new multifunctional space that could be used by the community, could be used by the museum, could be used by that engaged with the existing building, but I tried to also I suppose transform it in as subtle a way as possible, but something that acted as a lantern, I suppose, to the community. So this was just a very quick idea of where the building might sit, how it might glow, how we might illuminate the existing tower, and how it might reach out physically and visually to that route in and out of the main route heading into Hare Hills and back into the city centre. And then you can maybe subtly see we were interested in the use of two different colours of stone externally, as well as feature brick banding of two different colours. So we like this idea that we might create a promenade that would be a shared surface lined in cherry trees. There's a huge cemetery directly across the road. We create a promenade to the entrance, and then this surface that I suppose acted as a threshold that was almost felt like it was part of the existing building. So you can see there that surface treatment leading up to the entrance, and then this new lantern pavilion sitting to the side, and how that might open up. It might create a space at the front of the building, as well as be used in a multitude of ways. This is a project that I worked on back in, it's now going back 12 years ago. It's a housing project in a site to the north of Kinross and Milnathort, in Perth and Kinross. It's a mature woodland. You can see there, just in the middle of that mature woodland, there's a bit of a clearing there in the woodland that was the site of, I'm going to skip ahead, a former tuberculosis hospital, a really quite large, imposing building on the skyline. That sat in the middle of the site and then had lots of outbuildings. So when you were severely sick, you would be in the main building, and then as you started to recuperate, you would move to the outbuilding stretching out to the east. You can see there, well, I think you can see that it slopes up to the north. So this is the start of the Ochil Hills that really start here and stretch to the west through Clackmannanshire. The opportunity there, so that's the woodland in the foreground, and then these connections south down to Kinross, to Milnathort, and all the way back to the Pentland Hills, you know, way past Edinburgh in the distance. Obviously, a Victorian tuberculosis hospital. It was all about getting bombarded with clean air, clean fresh air. And you know, it's interesting, the Victorians really knew how to instinctively combat these diseases. It's about fresh air, about sunlight, about the natural environment, and that was quite important to us as we started to progress our thoughts for what we would do with the site. So essentially, it was a brownfield site, but a mature woodland and other man-made features like a decorative pond, water courses, and there was roadway accesses up through the woodland already established before we got involved in it. A drawing that we enjoy and we still use a lot, not just for this project but for others. It's now a ruined village called Mardgo in Perthshire. We like it because it shows an intent towards how buildings would just naturally nestle into landscape and work with the landscape that's there, as well as then turn and face south and southwest, and also create sheltered space, and also then stretch landscaping elements out to create courtyards. And so you get a gradation of private space, semi-private space, and then out to shared landscape space. But how buildings can adapt and respond and I suppose deviate by the way they sit in the landscape. This is another precedent for us. It's Swanston Village, just on the south of it, about the previous drawing, but built form turning and nestling into landscape, and also a series of almost parts of buildings that connect into each other, and how they can sit quite closely together. So when we were looking at this, we're obviously also interested in, you know, the rural architecture. These are different buildings. The one on the left is just outside Bankfoot, heading out to Perth. We're interested in that simplicity of form. I suppose a an important thing, preoccupation for us, is that that striving for a sense of calmness, but also a character as well. So the site plan, the lower darker block is an existing farmsteading that sits off the site. There's an existing linear route that stretches north and then swings round to the left. And what we did was essentially start to stitch these into the mature woodland. There's a pond in the middle of the site, or areas across the site. And we had to come up with a sort of kit of parts of houses that responded to the different character areas. So This went quiet back at MFA days, lay dormant for a while. And then when Malcolm and I set up again, the client came back to us and said he wanted to get the site moving. So we were initially instructed to take forward the first 11. It's 35 houses, or it will be 35 in total. And there's a core site, which is essentially the woodland, and then there's the ownership is much larger. There's a reservoir, there's to the north, there's lots of land to the east and the west that essentially, if you move into this community, you get a shared ownership of the wider parkland site. We came up with this idea of a toolkit of houses. So as part of the planning consent, we enshrined the principle that a basic house, and then over time you could extend it with the granny flat, the home gym, whatever you wanted it to be. And we enshrined that in the consent. And we also enshrined the principle of a limited palette of materials that allowed or potentially allowed a natural variation to occur depending on which purchaser wanted for their own home. So you start to see these buildings that are turning against each other, creating entrance courtyards, as well as connecting to longer views, and how they start to set up a rhythm against each other, and turn against each other as well for privacy. And you start to get a feel for the steeply sloping nature of the site as well. Some models, as part of the first stage, we were asked to look at 2 house types. We had to refine and that dreaded phrase, value engineer, but we had to get them to stack up in terms of a funding model as a kickstart development. So these are some of the marketing visuals, but the idea that you essentially the buildings turned, and rather than presenting a look towards views, we presented the gables, and it's obviously a very sensitive site, and to get the planners to buy into the idea of development, that was a really important step, to turn and present gables, because then you could see through built form and see through to the woodland and the natural environment beyond. So addressing the issue that other developers may well have gone down the route of creating a slab of development on the skyline. So these house types, we integrated garages, snugs, entrances between, and then working. So we have L-shaped housing, and we have a sort of slipped plan H or Z-shaped house. You can see in the section there, it's open plan. Sorry, the section there is open plan right the way through the ground floor, but working with the steep slope to creating living room, and how they connect through that, but with a fireplace sitting at the centre. These are the first 11 houses emerging on the site. That's a decorative pond there down on the right, but you start to get a feel for the patterns of built form that we're trying to achieve. That's the farm building on the left-hand side, and the new housing starting to emerge out the ground. Some recent drone footage, and these are getting reasonably close to handover, but scaffolding still up. Will hopefully be dropping soon, and how these buildings are nestled into the woodland. These are just some recent images of the L-shaped house and the slipped plan shaped house. We're using an open boarded larch cladding, which is used in lots of the surrounding agricultural buildings, as well as metal standing seam roofs of different colours and variations. You get a feel for the open boarded cladding there, how it sits against the trees, and then the views through. So the thin house footprint really allows use of the volume house builder housing that's happening across rural Perth and Kinross, that really places all the emphasis on it, making look like your own castle, and that the front door faces the street. So these have all gone. I think we hit the market at the right time. There was such demand. We've now been instructed to take forward the next phase of another 13, and just as of a couple of days ago, the remaining 11 plots. So there's going to be different house types across the rest of the site, which was always enshrined in the planning consent anyway. So we're starting to progress larger house types, buildings that sit and respond differently. So these are houses that will sit on the footprint of the old hospital. So they are flatter and have a larger presence on the site. And we're also developing other ones where there's quite steep sites with separate garages and routes up to the new homes. This was a study we did for the National Trust for Scotland down at Thrieve Castle. The castle, I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but the castle sits out on an island. You have to get a little boat across the water. There's a connection there. You see the little pier there on the right-hand side of the image. They own Kelton Mains Farm, which is a group of buildings that formed an old farmsteading. So there's there's the original farmhouse and outbuildings, as well as lots of outbuildings as well. You can see the metal and timber sheds on the left-hand side. They asked us to come up with a strategy. So the red dotted line that's diagonally running through the middle of that site plan is the main route in and out of Castle Douglas. And you would go to Kelton Mains, go through that, and then go on this looped walkway connection through the landscape to then go and visit Thrieve Castle. So these are some images that speak of that. Obviously, Thrieve Castle, number one, rather than just going on this loop through the landscape and going to the castle, we were keen to actually insert something into the landscape that allowed you to go up and actually see the castle from distance and understand how it sat within the wider landscape, and the fact that it sat on an island surrounded by water. So we came up with this idea of a timber eyrie, effectively a viewing platform that you would go up into and give you a much greater understanding of the wider area. So just scribbles that Andrew did in the office, the Kelton Mains, how we might wrap a cloister and create a new central civic space that, if it's bad weather, you could still be outside, but under shelter. You would move into different parts, from ticket office to cafe, restaurant, and there was also potential for one of the buildings to become an event space for weddings and things. And then some initial thoughts on how our timber area as a viewing platform and choreograph a route towards the visiting the castle. This is a building we're doing in central Edinburgh, just off the Pleasance. So the street is called Simon Square. We've called it Simon Court. It's an extremely tight site, constrained by effectively that square in plan, with a little sliver of green to the neighbouring building. This is actually north is actually to the right. So you've got that L-shaped building to the west and the south, and you've got an existing tenement on directly to the north. So it was a single-story garage building that you can see there on the left-hand side, and we were asked by the developer client to see if we could unlock it for residential use. Obviously, significant proximity issues. A very difficult site. Other architects had a look at trying to unlock it, and with no success. And so we got involved You can, from the photograph on the right, there's that's looking back. You'll start to see when I flick through these the different vantage points. So a little scribble of what we were thinking, effectively pulling the building as far away from as possible from the two-story L-shaped building, and building up against the gable end of the existing tenement, and how our new building might mediate between the scale of the two. This is an axonometric, again showing that four-story block up against the gable end, and then it's stepping down to form a new roof terrace from a rooftop pop-up, and then the 3 stories sitting with some equivalency of scale next to the two-story L-shaped building. Again, similar images that show the intent, and the idea of the architecture came from, I'll get onto some plans, but effectively part of the issue was we had to, in fact what I'll do is I'll just flick through these and then I'll go back the way. I want to get to a plan. So this is the plan of the building. The proximity was so tight that we had to look at a serrated built form that effectively meant that you weren't getting window to window with distances that were too serrated back edge. And then from the views that I showed initially, there are longer views from the 2 street corners up and down the street, but also connections to surrounding courtyards and mature trees. So chamfering the corners to actually, rather than make it very boxy on the site, that we actually gave it this faceted language that came right the way around the building. And then as the building stepped between stepped up from 3rd to 4th floor, how that form would then fold in, and it all became this coherent building, but have a singular language. So sorry, I'm going to jump back here. So that's that back elevation with the sort of zigzagged serrated windows looking back towards the mature trees. That's it from the street, with the chamfered corners and the windows turning the corner. And what we did was, I mean, we tested the language quite repetitive and singular, and realized that wasn't working for the what is very tight floor plates internally, and that we really had to design the building from the inside out, and then the outside in, and then the inside out again, which all the best buildings go through that process, I suppose. But the window composition is entirely generated from the internal plans and how we had to plan the apartments. And then another view with that chamfered corner condition as well. Some cast models were really keen that it effectively mediated between the rough coarse stone on the tenement on the right hand side, and then the rough harl of the 2-story L-shaped cottage buildings really on the left. You've seen from the photographs that the rendered building is a pinky color, and then there's the kind of more orthodox buff sandstone of Edinburgh. So we obviously a stone building has a difficulty, but we wanted something that had a texture and a richness, and so we were drawn to the Chipperfield building with a slurry coat across a brick leaf, and so we came up in traditional terms, or in Scots terms, you would call it a Slaister coat, and essentially it's a brick external leaf with this slurry coat that's put across it. You still see the brick behind it, but it gives it a more unifying feel, and you can obviously see the render on the left hand side and the stonework on the right. These are sales images that were done. The other main move with this building is it's built entirely from cross-laminated timber construction. So the whole structure is formed in that, and then we effectively insulate on the outside of that cavity wall brick, and then the Slaster coat with no membranes, no plastics or polythenes in that external wall construction. Vapor open to improve the internal air quality of the new houses, and we sought from the outset to try to expose the CLT as a feature, but also the smell of the timber and it being exposed is actually a really important quality. That proved to be, I'll go on to show you, but that proved to become tricky through the building regulation process. But essentially, this is the first floor plan. You come in off a courtyard and in through a central stair core, and then the flats wrap around the perimeter of it. You see that stair core rising up through, and then flats at each of the first 3 levels, and then there's a double upper from the 3rd floor that goes up into an open plan living space at the top with access to a roof terrace that faces south. So yeah, the CLT frame, we still believe this is the way forward. It's erected very quickly. It goes up in a fraction of the time of a traditional build, and also has that obvious benefits of carbon lock, as well as the quality of the internal environment. Very, very involved process with the CLT. And working with Egwin, who are based in the Basque Country. Going back to what I said earlier, we're very keen to lobby for a local CLT industry, but it's very much in its infancy. So this was imported from the Basque Country. What became apparent through the process, and we, Malcolm Fraser Architects, as I say, have built buildings with CLT in the past, but with residential, the issues of fire separation and acoustic separation in residential developments was hugely onerous, and so you start to see this kit of stuff of brackets, etc., that meant that we could achieve the acoustic separation. As well as coatings of the CLT internally to ensure it met the fire separation as well. So this is emerging on site. This is a very metallic industrial central stair going up through an exposed CLT core, and some test panels of the Slaster coat before they went on to deliver it on site. This is a photograph just from Monday this week. The first scaffolding was dropped just on the corner, so you start to get a feel for the architecture. So you get a sense that the 3 projects that we're currently building on site, the Toll House, Athron Hill and Simon Court, we had hoped they would all be finished by now, but with the pandemic, things have been delayed. This is going to be finished for a handover in March. Actually, all 3 buildings are now going to be handed over in March this year. So we've got a bit of a logjam. But you start to get a feel the heavier concrete coats, the Slaster coats, those patches that you see are just where they've patch repaired the scaffolding that was tied back to the CLT frame to help construction. They'll die down, and the corner windows there as features that wrap. That's how it's starting to sit in the streetscape. So this is literally just hot off the press. I think some more of the scaffolding has been taken down since this photo was taken, but yeah, we're excited to see this starting to emerge. Another project which we're in for detailed planning for is a site in Leslie Village, which is just to the west of Glenrothes in Fife. It's an edge of settlement housing project that it is actually a site of a former clay pit, so it's contaminated land. It's currently just it can't be used for farming, so it's lying empty. It's on a main road that leads west on the western edge of Leslie, leads into Leslie Village and then west to the motorway, and it looks out and directly connects across a golf course to East and West Lomond, across the Lomond Hills Regional Park that sits in that central part of Fife. We were asked to look at this with a local house builder and a housing association that we've done work with in the past, and because it was an edge of settlement location, we were keen to explore the idea of almost a steading typology, thinking about how it's stitched into the town or the village and part of the village, but also how it might have that more rural feel. So this is the master plan that we came up with. On all four sides, there's a cemetery directly to the east. There's then a very steeply sloping northern part of the site that you see those landscaping elements in. That connects to the distant views, so very sensitive in terms of how we engage with that view. Also, there's existing housing directly to the south of the site, so thinking how we don't create a wall of development, but still try as best we can to maintain. And then on the western edge, as it bounds onto farmland, how we sensitively engage with that. So one of the first moves was simply saying, well, let's present gables to all four corners and turn the houses. That dealt sensitively with and created a more feathered edge to all four sides, as well as turned the buildings to create south and southwest facing gardens for all the houses. We managed to achieve that on the site. So thinking again less about the volume house builder model and the more, I suppose, orthodox urban approach to housing, where it's very much about defined fronts to streets and backs, and the fact that you then get 50% of homes with north or east facing gardens. We wanted to really work hard to try to get every house with a south and southwest facing garden. And then the other element was creating more intimate courtyards. So you would move off the main streets, moving two entrances that looked around the site, and then gave access to these little courtyards, which were for parking, but for also the more intimate use of the residents that lived there, and hopefully kids can play in. And then creating this stretch of amenity space to the north, which will have allotments and community gardens and orchards and things that connects then to the distant views. So this is just an abstract image, just showing that idea of courtyards and how you would move off the main streets into these intimate courtyards and then into your home. And this is an image just showing that approach. So you hopefully it captures it well, that you actually see through from these courtyards to the distant views. You're not blocking the views, both for the new residents as well as the existing community, and how those courtyards might then be activated and occupied, and then with entrances carved out of corners that you enter off from these courtyards. This is just this very recent project, although it's been kind of around for a while. It's just a single sketch, but we're looking at an old school building in Kilkenny over in Ireland for an animation studio, and how we might transform that building into a new purpose-built facility for them. It's got great connections to the Kilkenny Cathedral and the Black Abbey. It's the smaller one to the right-hand side, and how we might convert and then remodel to create new screen, etc. So that's one that is very early days, but we're going to start to work on over the next, well, tomorrow. Strathearn Arts in Crieff. Crieff's a fantastic town. The Strathearn Arts are a very active organisation. They've been based in this building for quite some time, but the parts of it are under separate ownership. So the blue windows that you see above the shop unit there are owned separately, but the pink, which is Strathearn Arts corporate identity, is the building that they own, and goes through the floor plate from the shop unit on the corner. We've been asked to look at this, and we've done a feasibility for it to convert it to improve their accessibility, as well as to improve the flexibility of the spaces internally. So how might we do that? Give them a better frontage, active window onto the main street. The building then, if I jump back to this image, you can see in Crieff, it sits in this lovely landscape, wider landscape. So you can see from that photograph that the views down the hill allows you to get views back west along the valley. So what we're thinking of here, the building with the tall windows at the high level is actually just a big space that they use for various uses, film screenings, talks, etc. But they need it to be more purposeful for them. So we've suggested grafting this new element onto the west elevation. They own the lower level, which is used for various workspaces and small conference facilities. So we have a front end, as well as a secondary entrance for events in the evening. Signage might help give them a greater presence in the town, and how that big corner window at the high level might open up to 4 views out, so down the valley to the distant views over the countryside. Either during an event or at the end, and shutters open and reveal the context. And these are just some diagrams that Emma pulled together in the office of looking and exploring flexible uses for the internal space, and how events might change and adapt depending on what it is and what numbers they need to include. This is a nursery building that Malcolm has been involved with a community group for a long time now. It's an existing park in Blackhall, which is just to there's an existing building that's used for changing rooms, etc. by the community. There's football pitches in the park, but it really doesn't do what it needs to do. And the community got together. We're going through funding applications just now, and effectively creating a new mixed-use community facility, as well as a nursery for the local community. So the existing building isn't fit for purpose. It's but we can't build onto the existing park for obvious reasons. So we need to still build on the footprint of the existing building nestled into the corner of the park there. What we are doing is effectively creating a building that during the day acts as a nursery, and so there needs to be security. So the right-hand side of the plan there, there's then a route from the main access road from the left-hand side, and then how the building could then be used at evenings or weekends as changing facilities for the local community, for kids, sports, etc. So it's a building that's a private nursery during the day, but also then a community facility out with those hours. And you can see there on that plan the footprint of the existing building in the red angled rectangle. So this is an image of the nursery building that I talked about earlier for the University of Edinburgh that Malcolm Fraser Architects did. It formed entirely from CLT, exposed. The quality of that space and the benefits to health are already now well documented. Malcolm shows these graphs that show, a significant reduction in your heartbeat level, and so how that has serious benefits to your health as well as children's behaviour and their concentration levels, and just literally by being in a building made from exposed timber. Ideas of how we might unlock a section in a single-story building where we need to have these have a nursery space that can be adaptable and still bring light in. And so again, a building that has, I suppose, this again a civic emphasis, the colonnaded cloistered walkway that wraps around the three sides, and then this these triangular roof forms, roof lights that bring light into the plan through the depth of the plan. So again, this is out for funding, and we hope this is going to be put in for a detailed planning application in the next couple of months. We're also involved with Ascent Development Trust up at Achmelvich, which is an extraordinary location. They have, it's a very popular beach, and what they have significant issues, particularly on nice days with car parking and toilet facilities, etc. So the trust, we bid for this and won it, and the trust have asked us to look at how we might extend the car park, make it more efficient in terms of what's there already, as well as a single-story porta cabin of toilets that are currently on the site. So you can see there the plan on the left-hand side at the top is what's there currently. We are rationalising the car park and then replacing the toilet block with a new toilet facility, as well as a park rangers hut next to it, and to include outdoor shower facilities as well. So what we're proposing here is, again, using solid timber construction. We're thinking and exploring the use of dowel laminated timber, which is solid sections of timber that are literally laid and with timber nails, effectively, that build it up in layers. That essentially the whole built form will be formed in a dowel laminated timber construction. We're creating this veil externally, so you move round the perimeter with a veil of lightweight timber with an oversailing roof on all four sides, and then you move into the private, etc. And then how we might take some of the qualities of the natural landscape and actually then literally place that onto the roof, so that the building beds into the landscape and I suppose feels like it's in some respects it's always been there. This again has gone out to for funding. We've got detailed planning consent for this, and it's effectively waiting for the go-ahead to proceed. And then most recently we won a competition for a new housing master plan in Stromness up in Orkney. Malcolm Fraser Architects have already worked in that location. We did a new transformed the pier head for new community uses. There's a new library there. There's a new police base. There's a taxi rank. There's a new shop. It's a new community facility that wrapped the existing warehouse building there on the left-hand side. That was completed just as the office closed. I know it's a grainy image, but we're all fascinated by the patterns of places like Stromness, how they have evolved and adapted over time through obviously the purpose of connecting with directly to the water, as well as creating streets that provide a lot of the medieval patterns of towns, maybe in the central belt where I grew up in Dunfermline, or the high street in Edinburgh, where it is much more linear. There's these deviations and these slight shifts in the way the street pattern works, so that it provides shelter to the prevailing winds. So you see the pattern there, how the buildings connect on. I think some of you may be aware of this. I think this is your context for your, or maybe your context for your thesis projects. But you may well be well aware of the patterns and how buildings connect to the water line. We're also very interested in patterns of historic communities elsewhere. So this is Crovey, and the villages and settlements along that the Aberdeenshire and Moray coastline. We're also, haven't included it here, but we're just been appointed to take forward a housing project in Forres, and we're looking at the patterns of settlements like this, as well as the more planned towns of Moray and Aberdeenshire, and thinking how we might merge those patterns together to create something that speaks to both. Fascinated by these the built form that's there, and how it connects to landscape, and how it deals with the section. It turns against the water to try to create shelter and place, and how these buildings sit in such close proximity to each other. So the Ludbury House, that again is something that Malcolm and us in the office talk about regularly, but just fascinated by how these forms meet each other, how it connects to the water and creates these routes off the main street. So this is very early days, but we're also thinking about and interested in Jørn Utsen's housing in Denmark, in Copenhagen, the Kingo houses. This one's the Friedenberg housing development, but how the houses respond to the landscape. So rather than think right, well, let's flatten it and make building easier, how we actually use the undulations and the deviations of the landscape as you find it. And then start to bring housing onto the site that has a more geometric pattern, and how they actually sit tight and cheek by jowl, close together, and then leave these spaces that are more open and shared green spaces, and these fingers that run in alongside the housing. So we're looking at this as a reference point for what we're looking at Stromness, also because the actual sites themselves are so disparate. So this is a site plan that Ayla in the office has been slowly piecing together to understand what sites are effectively available. You can see the pattern. And our sites are all those different sites to the immediate west, bound by the red lines. They're so disparate and different that we're trying to understand the topography. work, as I say, working with what's there, as well as trying to make it of Stromness as well. So these are just some very early patterns of thoughts. They're nowhere near the finished article, but how we again might create courtyards of spaces, buildings that sit close together, but then, you know, introduce elements of the Stromnesian model, or the Ludbury housing, where it works through a split section. So you enter in the upper level, you move down through into a lower level, and then have these extended elements and private sheltered courtyards. That's me. So,